Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name's Steve, and it is time for the Week 2 rankings. Week 1 in the books. You can find these rankings as they will get updated throughout the week. So you can find the updated versions throughout the week up on the website, www.theffforge.com. You can find a link down in the description to the website. Otherwise, you can also come and see, if you want to see the updated rankings throughout the week, me live here on YouTube on Thursdays and Saturdays, both at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we can talk start-sit questions, trade questions, fantasy football, any questions related to fantasy football or real football. Just hang out, as well as, especially on the Saturday night ones, that's the most hangouty session. And then Sunday mornings, I'm also live. Each of these times, I will have the rankings up on the screen along with me. So like I said, the updated rankings will be available on Sunday mornings, 2 hours prior to kickoff. I think we've gotten the announcements out of the way. Please like, comment, subscribe. That always helps. Let's find out how I did last week before we delve into this week's rankings for my loves and my fades. Same exact idea as starts and sits for loves and fades. Hopefully you can figure out which one's which. So, for my loves, last week, I went 3 for 3, no doubt about that. Had Rashee Rice, Khalil Shakir, Brian Thomas Jr., all as loves, and all of them finished as top 24 wide receivers in half PPR scoring formats. So that is high success there. None of them ended up absolutely blowing up like we always hope, of course. Rashee Rice, I think, one touchdown and he's right up there, but just didn't quite get there. For my fades, technically in the grade books, I gave myself a 1 out of 3 here, but I'm not ashamed of any of my picks. I would do the same thing again, even knowing these results. If you put me back to 1 week ago today and you asked me for my fades, I give you the same 3 fades based on the information that I had on that time and based on the analysis that I made. I don't think that it was flawed, and I think that if we had another simulation of this weekend, there's a very good chance that all 3 of these would have, not succeeded. Who were they? Brandon Ayuk only had 3.7 fantasy points. That's the one where the grade book says I got it correct. For the next 2, George Pickens ended up as wide receiver 26. I think he performed as good as well as you could have expected, and I think a lot of that also has to do with something that I was not aware of when I made my fades, and I'm not making excuses here, but Russell Wilson being out, Justin Fields being in, I think that goes a long ways and will continue to, for as long as that is the case, go a long ways towards helping to just open things up for these receivers a little bit more due to the mobility of Justin Fields and the threat that presents to defenses. So that helps a lot, at least in terms of preventing somebody like George Pickens from maybe getting completely shut down by a cornerback, a tough cornerback, which unfortunately this week he has another tough matchup. But my third one, who I was not correct on, Xavier Worthy, and I did say he's going to have a limited amount of touches, and he's going to have to be highly efficient on those touches in order to come through for you, and that's why I didn't like him. And you know what? It took a busted coverage, and not it took, but he scored on a busted coverage for one of his 3 targets of the game, caught 2 of those targets, and he also was a part of a little bit of gadgetry, got involved on a jet sweep, and there you go. He took it all the way to the house. That's the threat that he is. He is ultra shifty. He had some very good blocking. But obviously, ultra efficient. 3 touches, and you get 2 touchdowns on those 3 touches. So I don't think that I was wrong to have him on the fade list. It played out like I thought it would. He just happened to score on both of those situations. So that's going to bring us on to this week. Who are my loves? Who are my fades? We'll get there. We'll go through this in tiers, starting off with my first tier. My wide receiver 1 this week, Tyreek Hill, going up against Buffalo. Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb. You're starting these guys. You know it. It doesn't matter if you think I have Mike Evans too high. It doesn't matter because I know that you're starting Mike Evans against Detroit this week, no matter who you have on your team. That's going to bring us on to my second tier, which isn't too far behind in terms of, I don't necessarily want to say expectations. There are some questions here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, given the matchup, given what we saw in week 1 from Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's some concerns here. Deebo Samuel, I'm very excited about going up against Minnesota. Same with Brandon Ayuk, who you can see will be my first love. Anybody else I really need to touch upon here? Justin Jefferson, obviously concerned about Nico Collins. There is some concern there as well. In Chicago, it should be seeing a lot of Jalen Jones, very good shutdown corner that will, make things tough, but I'm still going to give it a go. That connection's been very good through the first 2 years. Brandon Aiyuk, though, my love of the week here, going up against Minnesota. Debo, basically, I don't know, maybe I'll flip these by the end of the week, but actually, I very well might end up switching these guys exactly where they're ranked, might flip. So anyways, Brandon Aiyuk, a love of mine. I only highlight him because I think that some people will be afraid to start him after week one's performance. But, I had him as a fade week one for a reason. Just because it came through doesn't mean he can't have a big week here in week two. And I am expecting that. I'm expecting him to make minced meat out of this Minnesota secondary. They don't intimidate me just because they were... I don't even know where they ranked week one defensively, but just because they did well, I would assume, against the New York Giants doesn't mean anything to me. It's the New York Giants. That's, Danny Dimes, who unfortunately, somebody in this next tier we were relying upon. So let's see here. Next tier going from my wide receiver 13 down to 21 in Michael Pittman Jr. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see here. There we go. So this tier starts off with Rashee Rice, followed by Garrett Wilson, Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, Devonta Smith, Stephon Diggs, Malik Neighbors, Zay Flowers, Michael Pittman Jr. So as I was just about to say for Malik Neighbors, second week in a row, I can't put him as high as I want because of the matchup, because of the quarterback. And unfortunately, week one, there was no promising signs of Danny Dimes at least being competent. He looked not too unlike he looked in the preseason. Hopefully things turn around. Really good matchup here secondary-wise. Again, probably even a better matchup because they have less of a pass rush than Minnesota. But, we got to see something there. So, an okay start from Malik Neighbors, but to really put him up in the rankings, we need to see a little bit more from Danny Dimes and getting that ball to him just a few more times as well. Get Wan'Dale Robinson a little less involved. That's going to bring us to my first fade here in Rashee Rice. I have him ranked 13th on the week still, but, I don't really like to highlight guys who you're probably going to be playing. But Rashee Rice was taken, quite late even in some drafts, depending on exactly when you drafted. Late enough that you probably have other options at your wide receiver position that you could play over Rashee Rice if you were to agree to an extreme enough extent with my concerns for Rashee Rice this week. My concern is Mike Hilton, the nickelback, the guy who's going to be covering most of the time. Rashee Rice should be. Mike Hilton has been as steady as they come against slot receivers since 2017, his second year in the league. This just might be one of those weeks where Kansas City is going to be scheming up the ball to go elsewhere. I'm looking at you, Marquise Brown, if you return this week, which is looking possible. I would like that connection to be a little bit stronger, to have more concern for Rashee Rice, more faith in Marquise Brown when it comes to his ranking. But regardless, Xavier Worthy, another guy who I think could see more than 4 touches this week, maybe 6, 7 kinds of targets and touches combined. So, concern there for Rashee Rice. Mike Hilton's quite good. But, only up to a point. Then we've got, let's see here, Chris Godwin, very excited about, again, another good matchup. Chris Olave, obviously a very disappointing first week. The Dallas pass rush is concerning for me yet again, but I do think a more competitive game where they're probably working from behind. I don't know about hopefully, but, it should be a better week for Chris Olave. I am not going to give up on him after one poor performance. Garrett Wilson, a little bit concerned about. Devonta Smith, I'm actually pretty optimistic about being on the other side of that cornerback duo there in Atlanta. And Stephon Diggs is another love of mine, the second love we got in this video going up against Chicago. Last week, I liked all of the Houston receivers. This week, I am concerned about the other receivers, but I am optimistic to a pretty high extent about Stephon Diggs this week after, a successful first week combined. So this Chicago secondary, to me, only has one real glaring weakness, and that is at the slot against slot receivers. So, as I expected, that's where Stephon Diggs in week one roamed for the most part. He was in the slot. 64% of his routes were run from the slot in week 1. And I do want to highlight the matchup also here between Tank Dell and Tyrique Stevenson. So if it wasn't clear, I like Stephon Diggs because he's running from the slot. I think that's where the weakness is in this Chicago defense, in terms of the secondary at the very least. But Stephon Diggs, I mean, Tank Dell going to be seeing a lot of Tyrique Stevenson, I'm sure, and that's a matchup who I would be very curious to watch if I'm watching that game. Very curious to find out what the results will end up being at the end of the day there, because you have Tank Dell, an undersized speedster of a wide receiver, going up against Tyrique Stevenson, who is an overly physical cornerback. Is he going to lock up Tank Dell all day and just make it super frustrating? Or is Tank Dell once or twice going to catch him, trying to lock him up, and just fly right past him for a lot of fantasy points? That's also possible. To finish this up, that's it. That tier. Let's move on to this third tier of mine. And this tier goes from wide receiver 22 all the way down to wide receiver 31, starting off with DJ Moore going up against Houston, followed by Davante Adams, Tank Dell, Jameson Williams, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin. You can jumble these guys up in whatever order. I'm sure this is an area of my rankings where I will have some alterations going on throughout the week. So, there's concerns for guys like DJ Moore, Davante Adams, especially here, given who they're going to be seeing on the opposite side of the ball. So it's just how much do I give into matchup versus talent for this tier, compared to also what we've seen so far this season, which there are additional concerns for Adams, DJ Moore, with their quarterbacks where they're currently at. So that makes, a Tank Dell, a Drake London, the quarterback situation there is super scary. DK Metcalf, a limited situation there against New England. Keenan Allen. Optimistically excited about this one, but I'm not 100% sure about that with Jalen Pedra. I don't know how much he's improved as a coverage guy over one more year here. So that's a matchup I lean towards Keenan Allen on that one. Amari Cooper, Jacksonville, week 2 here. A quarterback issue, again, looked quite terrible. Marvin Harrison Jr., we know all about that, but I like the matchup quite a bit. Same with Terry McLaurin. I like the matchup quite a bit, but we saw a really sad week 1. There is one guy in this tier that I am high on, and that is Jameson Williams going up against Tampa Bay. I expect Detroit versus Tampa Bay to be one of those back and forth affairs. And I'm jumping on this ship. Jameson Williams, a guy who over the last month or so of the offseason really rose up my rankings, went from being dug 6 feet under, or went from being buried 6 feet under, to digging him out of that hole in my rankings, and actually mocking him sometimes. I was slightly excited about the potential, and he surpassed that in week 1. I'm on board for it. It's concerning for other guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll see. But this week, because of the matchup, I'm following it up. I'm thinking we see the good vibes continue at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Detroit in terms of Jameson Williams' fantasy contribution for your team. Let's finish this up with my final tier, which goes from wide receiver 32 down to wide receiver 41, starting off with Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., two guys who, I'm concerned about a little bit. I have Worthy over Brian Thomas Jr. because of the matchup. Much more, I think, in favor of Xavier Worthy there, despite Brian Thomas Jr. maybe having more opportunity in week 1, but going up against Cleveland, a little concerning. What I will say about this in terms of optimism, and maybe why I'm not super concerned about Brian Thomas Jr., is that Cleveland's defense, although struggling week 1 at home last season, struggled on the road all season long. So we know that the Cleveland defense has a lot of potential, but they were uneven in their performances last year. And so we'll see how this game, it could be another ugly game there in general. But we'll see. George Pickens going up against Denver, another tough matchup. Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman. I don't even like how far I have them apart from one another here in the rankings, something that could end up getting closer to one another. But this is another week with a matchup where I like the matchup for somebody to come through out of those Buffalo wide receivers, and these are the two that Week 1, it was Khalil Shakir in terms of results, but in terms of opportunity, it was Keon Coleman. So they're very, very much neck and neck in terms of my expectations, and I don't know which one it will end up being. Ladd McConkey going up against Carolina, I like that a lot. Will this end up being a thing where Carolina's so bad against the run that their passing defense is good in terms of it being a bad matchup for fantasy? Not because they are good, but because it's just teams are running on them all day. That's very much a possibility. But for now, for one more week here, I'm going to still get excited about receivers against Carolina. Ladd McConkey is going to be my guy, I guess, for Los Angeles Chargers this week. Jayden Reed is my second fade of the week here, and I have 2 words written next to his name for my notes. Malik Willis. I'm definitely scared of what this offense will look like under Malik Willis's tutelage, and I don't see a ceiling. The ceiling is already at my waist for my expectations here. I'm out on all things Green Bay offense for the most part here. The rushing attack this week will be something to attack. Brandon Cooks going up against New Orleans, 7 targets last week, so excited about that. He was somebody I was high on last season, and then I'm a broken man this year, and all my guys I was high on last season have been doing well over in 1 week. So I'm following that up, having some faith. We did see that start to come together late last season and looking better already week 1 this season. Christian Kirk going up against Cleveland. This is another matchup issue for me for Christian Kirk going up against the slot corner Greg Newsome, who is one of the better slot corners in the league, at least as of recent performances. And so that's going to be tough. This is another situation where Christian Kirk's just going to have to be highly, at least fairly highly efficient on a limited amount of work, because he was the guy who saw the least amount of routes run out of the top 3 wide receivers, the least amount of snaps on the field out of them. And so that is, already working from a less than full opportunity here, and a tough matchup on top of that. Then Deontay Johnson, Keon Coleman. Deontay, I'm slightly optimistic against the Los Angeles Chargers, although he does draw Asante Samuel Jr., so that does scare me a little bit, and in fact, that scares me enough that I am going to bring Keon Coleman up 1 spot here in my rankings ahead of Deontay Johnson, just because of the quarterback, and that's the main reason there. So Deontay Johnson, I'm still optimistic about possibly going forward, but it was even. I did not have any good expectations for Carolina, but I would say it might have been even worse than I anticipated week 1 there. So look for them to hopefully improve things for Carolina Panthers fans' sake. Outside of the top 40, I do have 2 players outside of my top 40 that were in the ECR expert consensus ranking from Fantasy Pros website's top 40 as of now. And those 2 players are Calvin Ridley going up against the New York Jets, so you can understand why I have some hesitancy after week 1. There, I was not sold that Will Levis would be the next coming, and week 1 wasn't pretty at all, but it's 1 week. Lots of things happen in single weeks in the NFL, so we'll see. And then T. Higgins. I don't have him ranked right now at all. In fact, I think I have Yoshivas next. Oh, no, Marquise Brown I have next here. But I don't have him ranked right now. I'm not expecting him to play with that hamstring injury, and if he does, I will definitely be hesitant on how high I have him ranked. Let's see. How high roughly would I have him ranked? By the way, I have almost 80 wide receivers ranked this week, so you can see more up on the website. But T. Higgins, he's in. I guess if they're playing him, I might put him ahead of Jayden Reed, roughly in that. Man, maybe not Jayden Reed. Might put him ahead of like Deontay Johnson. I don't know. He's borderline top 40, even if he does play for me this coming weekend. All right. Although they're playing against Cincinnati, Kansas City. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do there. You can check it out Sunday morning or any other day that we find out he is playing. Peace out. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Running back rankings come out next, and then quarterback and tight end rankings after that. So stay tuned for those videos, and I love you. Peace out, guys.